Hello and welcome to Hadfield Education's Good to Great webinar series, where I interview the head teachers and senior leaders within the UK education sector. And today I've been joined by Andrew Hampton, who is the head at Thorpe Hall School in Southend. Good afternoon, Andrew. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, Lee. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, great to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So Andrew, I always like to start off by just finding out about you and how you got into education.
Yeah.
So what took you into teaching?
When I was about 11 years old, I wanted to be a teacher, which makes me very sad. And I think probably at the age of 12, I probably wanted to be a head teacher, which makes me even sadder. But I went to university. I kind of fell into show business at that point. And there was one moment, just as I graduated, that I actually did apply to teacher training college to become an English teacher. I was offered a place, but actually the lure of the greased makeup and the stage was too great, and I went on to do acting, made some TV things and did lots of stage work. And at the end of that, I thought, well, actually, my parents spent a lot of money on my education. I was educated privately, and there I was on a stage in Liverpool, basically being directed not to bump into the furniture, speak louder and get off, and that was it. And I thought, this is no job actually for an intelligent and well-educated person. So I kind of went back home and thought, no, I will try and get into education at this point. I did actually have a little bit of a career as a composer then, but started to teach clarinet and saxophone. That was my first job in the school. So I taught at the King Alfred School in North London for 1 day a week, teaching saxophone. Now, I did that for 5 years, became head of music, and then decided at that point, that's when I wanted to kind of, reignite my ambition to become a leader of education. And so I qualified through doing a master's degree in educational leadership and management through OU and various other qualifications, including NPQH, and got my first headship when I was 45. I ran a small school in Nottingham for 4 years, and then I came down to Southend. So I jumped over deputy headship. And yes, I've been a head 16 years this Christmas.
So when you were initially teaching as just a normal music teacher and what have you, what were your biggest insights? What were the learned and experience that really sort of they structured and molded you into the teacher that you were?
I was a music teacher, and I think that's a very particular subject. And sort of, teaching, you've got effectively kind of two types of music teaching to be done. First of all, in Key Stage 3, which is music for all. So you have to kind of tailor what you're doing to make sure that everybody, whether they're a musician or not, can do it. And then when you take it to GCSE and A-level, then you're dealing with musicians. I think for me, it was always, good lesson planning was important, and a good structure whereby there would be an exposition for a lesson, and then making sure that the lesson was really active and had things that the children could participate in and demonstrate that they'd done at the end of the lesson. So the plenary at the end was very, very real, and they would take away the things that they'd learned from that lesson. And I thought that, that's what I tried to do pretty much lesson after lesson every single time, just varying the topic, but always trying to get them to make music, do something very active, and send them on their way.
And in terms of mentors and real sort of guidance, who influenced your teaching?
I think that I learned a lot by doing the master's degree, because I didn't do a teaching qualification. I mean, it's been a strange career. I watched colleagues. I employed people who I then became very influenced by. At one point, as a music teacher, I was trying to get 10 things done in the lesson, and I watched this other teacher, and she was like doing 2 things, and actually but they did them really well, and they came away having learned those 2 things. So I thought that was very influential for me. But I think, the first year of my master's degree, we looked at teaching and learning and how learning takes place. And a lot of that stuff really went in. So the Vygotsky and Piaget and Levin-Wenger and the peripheral participation theories. So quite a lot of those kind of learning theories I kind of really enjoyed and took to, and then went on to do quite a lot of management theory in the second 2 years of that master's degree. And that was very influential too.
Brilliant. And then obviously the natural progression is to then lead a department. When did that happen?
That happened after, again, slightly odd career. So I was actually working in 2 schools. I was working at the King Alfred School and at the Hall School, which is a prep school in Swiss Cottage, as a clarinet and saxophone teacher, but gradually getting invited to come into the classroom to take lessons. And then at King Alfred School, they had a crisis with the head of department that they kept appointing people who didn't stay for more than a year. And I put my hand up and said, look, I'll do it. And they said, yeah, you should, which was lovely. It was a really nice moment. And so at that point, I kind of had to write all my schemes of work throughout all the years that I did very rapidly and sort of get myself into the classroom and pretty much taught myself how to be a teacher. But obviously, yeah, talking to colleagues along the way and just learning on the job as much as anything else.
And in terms of department, was that a standalone role, or did you have other musicians with you?
I think being a head of music is a great learning ground for becoming a head teacher, because it was a very big department, by far the biggest in the school, if you include the 11 or 12 instrumental teachers that I had to manage. So I had a part-timer working with me in Key Stage 3, 4 and 5. I was also the head of music for the lower school, which was that school at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So those were the kind of the music teachers I was managing. But as I say, then managing 11 peripatetic teachers. And peripatetic teachers are actually very difficult to manage, because often they are musicians first and teachers second. Yeah. So they kind of roll up, 3 hours late going, yeah, well, I had a late night last night. You're going, you have no idea the problems you've caused me. So yeah, it was a real kind of baptism by fire being a head of music. And yeah, it prepares you for headship extremely well.
And so where did you move? So from head of department,
yeah.
How did you then progress into the senior leadership and then into headship?
Painfully, I think is the first word I would use. I mean, after I'd been head of music for about 6 years, I decided that I had the master's degree and I was in the process of doing NPQH, and that I would like to move on to deputy headship. For the next 4 years, I think it took, I applied to well over 90 applications. I had 16 interviews. I was offered 2 jobs, turned them down. I was turned down internally 4 times. You'd have thought I'd learnt by then.
Wow.
And then actually a couple of people just said to me, the problem that you're experiencing getting a deputy headship is that you're not a deputy head, you're a head. One person particularly said to me, I would never employ you as a deputy head, you're far too kind of scary, knowledgeable, you've got a very, very, very clear what you want to do in education, and so no, absolutely not. And I actually literally got the first headship I applied for. So they were right. Yeah.
And how was it taking the main chair in school?
There's no doubt about it. It's scary stuff. It's scary stuff, because particularly I think because I've been at the King Alfred School for such a long time.
Sure.
I think probably from the age of 28 until 45. So, it was a long, long, long time to be embedded, particularly in a school that had its own particular ethos. King Alfred is very funky. It's they call the teachers by the Christian names and no uniform and all that sort of thing. Then going back into a much more conventional school, which is what it was. It was called Thorpe Hall School in Nottingham. Unfortunately, it's closed now. But it was scary, but also very, very exciting. So one of the things that happened was that the behaviour was very, very poor in that school. And after I'd been there about 10 days, I had a knock on the door from the contractors who were working next door on a building site. And they were very polite. And he came in and said, look, I don't want to make a fuss about this, but perhaps you could ask your children not to throw bricks at my contractors. And I was, oh my goodness me, what on earth is going on? So we'd also had an incident before I joined. I joined in January, and I heard that the Christmas tree that they put up in the foyer, all the baubles had been smashed by the children. And I'm thinking, wow, that's quite a gesture from year 10 children to kind of, just smash things like that. So I thought this is a deeply, deeply unhappy school. And indeed, the teachers were saying to me, well, we're okay in the classroom, but on the corridor, we're really hanging on by our fingernails in terms of discipline. So it was a very dramatic moment. And because I'd come from a liberal school as a teacher, but also actually a very liberal school as a boy, I was at Winchester, which is a very liberal school. So I called everybody together and I said, so things are not going very well, kids. We're kind of beginning to lose sense of propriety and dignity at this school. I think we need to sort of do something quite dramatic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stop having detentions. And there's this sort of, penny drop, then a gasp, and sort of, people turning to each other and say, this guy for real, he's been here 2 weeks and he's just nice to do something very, very dramatic. So yeah, so I don't see the point of detention. It's not working. All we ever do is punish you. So what we need to do is to kind of build a bit of trust between you and us and try and break down that language and just say, would you mind behaving yourselves now? And then that would be great. And they kind of went, yeah, okay. I had then had to persuade the team, but it did. I mean, they really did. They kind of came with that journey very, very easily. And then the teachers, there was a moment when one of the science teachers said, well, I just don't understand, we have no leverage left, blah, blah, blah. And then the head of English just said, well, but Steve, he said, I'm so fed up with taking your detentions. All you ever do is fail to manage the behaviour in your classroom and put them in a detention on Friday afternoon, and I'm the one who has to take that detention.
Sure.
And so, I was saying to teachers, no, it's down to you. You've got to control the children, and you've got to do that through pace and through compassion. And so, go out there and make that happen. I didn't tell the governors until after it was a success. So. So I think if I told them, they'd have gone, what? Don't do that. So,
and what other successes did you have while you were at Dagfa?
I just had to kind of unravel an extremely authoritarian headship that had been before me. So it was having to reskill people. So literally, I mean, one thing I did was to try to sort of deploy money sensibly. So I gave the person who decided to take on all the displays in the junior school, and I gave her sort of £300 to do that. And after a couple of terms, I said, so I see you haven't spent any of your money. And she said, well, but it's not mine. I said, well, it is yours. And she said, but I thought you would spend it. I'm like, no, I gave you some money. Go and spend it. So those were the sort of things I was doing, and just constantly trying to liberate and lift the lid off the school so that it could breathe as much as anything else.
And what advice would you give to any aspiring deputy that's looking to take their first headship?
I think that, and that's something I kind of know a lot about, because I've been running with a woman called Jill Berry in the independent sector. I've been running a course for about 7 or 8 years now for new and aspirant heads in the independent sector. And people can look that up. It's called leadinganindependent.school.co.uk. So that's something that Jill and we work with about 60 people a year on precisely that. So I would say the first thing to say is that headship is a very different job. I mean, I wasn't a deputy, so I don't know from first hand, but the deputy head is about the status quo. It's about organising. It's about making sure that the school runs smoothly, that you understand what the policy is, and then you make sure that you stamp that policy onto the school and make sure that those policies are running. Whereas headship is all about leadership. It's about changing policies. It's about questioning whether we could do things better all the time. And also, I think, looking at every problem from a strategic and structural point of view. So if somebody makes a mistake, it may be that the deputy head is the one who sort of says, excuse me, that went wrong, what are you doing? Why are you not concentrating, blah, 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 to a teacher, and sort of holds them to account. Which I think the head is going, so structurally, is there something wrong with this? Is that person overworked? Is that why these things are happening? And quite often you think, no, there is no structural issue here, it was just human error. But I'm a great believer in no blame. I think, people beat themselves up quite enough. There's no need for you to be going, I'm disappointed with you, because that doesn't really work. It just makes them feel frightened of you and anxious. So yeah, so again, my style is very liberal. Deputy headship, yeah, so lots of whole school experience, and be ambitious. Keep your eyes up on the horizon in terms of the wider picture. If you're looking for a school, look at the community that it's in. I was always given the good tip, if you are given an interview, when you take a taxi or something, ask local people what they know about the school. Do your research. I think that's absolutely critical. So go to the school knowing absolutely everything there is to possibly know about that school, and that will impress them, and also give you a sense of whether you want to work there or not, because not every school is right for every deputy head, that's for sure.
So who's been your biggest influence as a head teacher?
I think my father, probably. He wasn't a teacher, but he was an industrialist. He ran a steel company up in Sheffield, and his style was always not to hold people to account. He was just like, okay, all right, that's really, and that was his style as a dad. And I think that's what I've always done, and I think that has liberated people to do what they can, and get the best out of people, is to be gentle and compassionate with them. I think he was a huge influence on me in that sense. And to be honest, and it feels a bit kind of arrogant and churlish, but I learned a lot by working under head teachers who weren't terribly good.
Yeah.
So you sort of look above and think, God, I wouldn't do it like that.
It's often the way, isn't it? If within any employment,
yeah.
If you see good practice, you're likely to mimic and to replicate. And likewise, if you see somebody really make a hash of something, you're less likely to replicate that as well. So, and in terms of your biggest challenges within your headship currently, what are those now?
currently, I think the school has grown quite a lot. So when I got here, it was about 350, then it went down to 300.
Okay.
It's now at 390. And so the challenge is sort of keeping that small, intimate school feel going, keeping on top of all the projects that we want to do. So I think this term particularly, a lot of people around me saying, gosh, we are, noticeably more busy, and that therefore means that you're dropping balls here and dropping balls there. We've just decided to become, sort of genuinely sustainable school, and actually the amount of work coming across my desk is considerable on that, and it's really quite hard to keep track of that. So it's trying to keep all the balls in the air, I think, always, keeping those kind of long-term strategic goals going, but also, talking to little Oscar, who's being a pain in the playground, or and that's one of the joys of Headship, but it's very challenging in terms of keeping all those things running, concurrently. Yeah.
Sure. And in terms of education, what's one thing that you would change if you could?
I think the education is just possibly emerging from an absolutely hideous period of neoliberalism, where everything is measured and it's all about the data. In the state sector, it still is, I believe, hugely data-driven. I think that although Ofsted are a lot more, warm and fuzzy, but it's still about, well, if the results are bad, the results are bad, And I think, well, that's a real shame, because behind every set of results, there's some human stories, and you need to know those human stories. So I think that what I would change about education is to remove some of the testing. A lot of countries don't test anybody really seriously until they're 16 or even 18 for that matter. So I think putting pressure on my wife, I've disappeared a bit, haven't I? So my wife works in a state primary school, and the pressure that she's under to get those results, and looking at this child, looking at that child, pressure, can you think, if you start again, you wouldn't start from here. You wouldn't say, like, here's a bunch of 8-year-olds. So what we've got to do is measure where they are, and measure them again in 6 months, and then again, and then again, and then get really worried about that, and then blame the teacher because they haven't learned to read. You say something to an 8-year-old one day and they've got it completely. The next day they don't remember what that they were in school. I mean, it comes and goes. Learning is not a curve, not a straight line. I mean, it's a bumpy curve. And I think if we could really embrace that in education, I think we would all be a lot happier.
Fantastic. Agreed completely. And like you say, there's always a story behind every child, isn't there? Like you say, we're all learning as we go. And in terms of current initiatives within school, do you have any particular favourites or things that are working specifically well?
I've mentioned sustainability. That's just getting off the ground. The other thing that I have been doing successfully at the school is a thing called Girls on Board. And then I want to tell you what I'm doing now for boys, which is the new initiative. So Girls on Board is a thing that I invented here about 7 or 8 years ago. And it basically is a different way of supporting girls when their friendships go wrong. So I think that the hardest thing for girls and supporting girls is when those friendships go wrong, they get very, very upset, and they can really struggle to get back into a kind of a happy state again. And I think the reason that adults don't support them effectively is because when a girl is upset, she starts telling her story, and teachers start to write things down on the assumption that because she's upset, somebody must have upset her, somebody must have been doing something wrong to upset her. But actually, that is rarely the case. Sometimes it is the case. Sometimes bullying is taking place. But actually, a lot of the time, it's just turbulence in the friendship groups. They're all really worried about their friendships. They're anxious about those friendships, and things have happened. And that girl has chosen to come and talk to you about why she's upset. So instead, what we do within the Girls on Board school is we listen to that story. We check that she's not being bullied. It may be that just listening is enough, and just kind of, okay, how are you feeling now? Yeah, I feel, got it off my chest, and go back out to the corridor.
Sure.
Or if not, we'll call it Girls on Board session. Our Girls on Board session is really just an empathy-raising moment where we say, look, all girls have this anxiety. Every girl must have a friend. So let's just look at the things that happen in the school day. So you're walking down the corridor, three side by side, and you have to go single file. Who's going to go at the front? Who's going to go in the middle? And of course the girls go, oh my God, this is a real problem. You turn to the boys and they're kind of going, sorry, what's the question? Seriously? This is an issue? Where are you going? Wow, that's amazing. For the girls, it's like, we could talk about this for half an hour. And we do, we analyse it. So why would you go at the front? I'd go here because of that. Why would you go in the middle? And they've all got reasons, even down as young as 7 years old. They can tell you why they would go at the front, middle, or back. So at the end of that, you would have effectively kind of raised that empathy. So they're looking across the year group thinking, she's unhappy, someone's got to sort this out, she's going to have to join a friendship group. So we then have empowered them basically to go and sort it out for themselves, and the grown-ups stay out of it. Now that's been very successful here. I was given permission by my governors about 2.5 years ago to commercialise, to monetise that. So as a head teacher, I go out to other schools and I invite people to join me in those schools, and I host training sessions. We've got 110 schools across the country doing Girls on Board. So if you want to do that, girlsonboard.co.uk. Thank you.
Brilliant. No. And that covers, so you cover the entire UK where that's concerned, not just locally.
No, the whole UK. Yeah, going up to Scotland next summer.
I'm just thinking from a. I mean, I'm a dad and I have 2 girls, and I can 100% appreciate everything that you've turned around and said. I also compare that to my friends who've got boys, and they are so different in, like you say, the way in which they take on board the emotional state and the worry and the anxiety, which is really significantly heightened nowadays. It's almost like everybody's got a huge problem that they sort of face and are trying to deal with. So it sounds like a terrific initiative.
It's very powerful, and we've won a couple of prizes for that, so that's going very well. But of course, along the way, obviously people keep saying to me, so what are you doing with boys? And I do have finally an answer to that. I mean, it's taken a very, very long time to kind of work out what I want to say about boys. So the first thing I'd say is that friendship isn't the issue for boys. The most intractable or difficult problem is engagement, is motivation, is disappearing down the wormhole of grunty, moody, depressed, I don't care about anything, and blah, blah, blah. So basically what I've done in a similar way is kind of codified that. And so first of all, the codification would be, it's not about isolation. For girls, it's about isolation. It's about avoiding isolation. For boys, I think it's about avoiding humiliation.
Yeah.
It's about retaining dignity. And that will drive them to behave in ways that they're not always entirely proud of. In order to avoid humiliation, I have to push the humiliation onto other people. Then I think you're looking at emotional literacy generally, of understanding that you're not annoyed, you're furious, you're really angry. What do you get angry about? Well, actually, boys all get angry about the same things. They get angry with siblings, with parents who patronise them, teachers who are boring, football, full stop, gaming that goes wrong. And again, you're kind of raising the empathy in the room there by having those kind of conversations, although that doesn't necessarily change the way they relate to each other. So what I'm trying to do now is to create a new kind of ethical and moral framework around the way they relate to each other. And where I've been going wrong in the past is doing that too late. So I'm trying to kind of go, oh look, all the boys in year 9 are hideous and they're mean to each other and they're miserable. But it's too late. I've missed the boat. They have established the culture with which they will address each other, particularly when it comes to banter and things like that.
Sure.
So what I'm doing now is working with year 7, where actually they understand what I'm saying, but they haven't yet become the grunty horribles. So I'm literally working with year 7 this week and asking them to tell me about their older brothers, boys and girls, and they kind of say, oh yeah, he's really moody and he's really mean to me. And so I'm just, similar to Girls on Board, I liked that teaching of just getting people to reflect. So it's not didactic, it's just like, I use the phrase a lot, like, isn't it true to say? What do you think? Have you experienced that? So that they're digging around in their own experience and making connections, I think, between things that they have experienced. So that I'm hoping that by doing that and looking at banter, looking at sensitivity to banter, looking at what's acceptable, what isn't, perhaps being a little bit more deliberate when it comes to things like sexualized language, and sort of saying, actually, I really disapprove of that. I just don't think we should do that. That's not dignified. So there is a kind of a moral overlay, of course there is. But there's a lot of just getting them to reflect on the fact that if they allow their banter to become very harsh, it has a ratchet effect. It's very difficult to come back from the humour that was gentle and no longer is gentle.
Yeah.
And at the heart of that then, and I think I've pretty much concluded my thoughts on this, is masculinity. So I'm hanging it all on the kind of, what is gentle masculinity? What is sour masculinity? There's a great book out at the moment called Boys Don't Try. They use the words tender and non-tender. I've kind of converted that for myself. And we start those lessons throughout the school, actually, I'm doing it at the moment, just saying, so what is gentle and what is sour? It's harsh, it's kind, it's respectful, it's considerate, or it's tough and it's over-competitive, it's arrogant, it's selfish, it's rude. And let's just reflect on those things. And what kind of boy, what kind of man do you want to be? And then the boys would kind of go, oh, we're all these things. We're fine. We're really sweet and lovely. And then the girls kind of go, yeah, no, you're not. And that's really, really useful to having the girls there in the room. It's like, yeah, no, absolutely not. So I guess, it's early days for this, but I'm hoping that that will have an effect, looking at, as I say, the way in which boys relate to each other.
Sounds fantastic.
Really interesting.
Fantastic. It'd be good to, if we can, perhaps have a follow-up at, around about end of term or end of year, whichever you see fit.
Well, I think in terms of masculinity, probably end of year, because I think it's going to take time to kind of embed that and have several lessons. I've got one of my teachers is doing NPQSL, and she's going to do it on masculinity. So she's going to take some data and see if we can, prove a point. I think what we'll do is probably take what I'm recommending for her to do is to take maybe 10 boys, have a look at attitudes towards, say, homework, and see if we can change their attitudes towards homework.
Sure. Sure. Makes sense.
It's a good thing to work, not a bad thing. It's cool to work, not uncool. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is interesting because I seem to be given the impression within my sort of peer group that nowadays being clever and being a bit of a school geek is actually seen as cool. Which when I was at school, it was completely the opposite. That it was a complete polar apart. So again, quite interesting where homework and things like that are concerned.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Geekiness has become cool, hasn't it? In a way, which is a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there are so many niches now, and children are exposed to such a vast variety of influence, and it really is an influence. And I probably would say that with my upbringing and my education, it was very much a meat and two veg. It was this way or that way. You're either clever or you were sporty. There was nothing really in between. And yet now, every child is so unique, and it's good, but it's incredibly difficult to cater for.
Sure.
Obviously from within a school. But fantastic, excellent. So in terms of moving forward then, just a couple of other random questions, but what are you currently reading at the moment? What book are you
I'm reading a book called The Interestings. It's an American book. My daughter gave it to me. She's very good at finding new authors for me. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's a lovely book of life in America and growing up, and I love it. It's great.
And what's your favourite interview question?
I like talking about girls on board. There's no doubt about that.
And in terms of, if you weren't a teacher, where would you be? What would you be doing?
I have another life, which is in music. So I play saxophone, and I'd love to do more of that. Be able to compose more and play more. That's always been something I'll probably do when I step away from Headship. Do more of that. But I hope also to have the chance to kind of work further in education when I eventually step away from Headship as well, and sort of consultancy and so on.
Brilliant. And favourite holiday destination?
I like home. I'm a staycation guy. I really am.
Excellent.
I find going away very stressful. I'd rather stay at home.
And in terms of apps, because obviously we live in an app culture now, what's your favourite work app?
Well, I would say that Twitter, is that an app? I don't know. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I think for girls on board it's been very, very useful. So I do enjoy time on Twitter.
Is that something that you have within school specifically?
Not so much. The school has Twitter accounts and so on, as everybody does. We tend to use Facebook a lot more than Twitter. But Girls on Board on Twitter has been very successful because there are an awful lot of teachers on Twitter who are doing their own thing. So there's a fantastic English educators community there that's very, very powerful. So I think that's been really, really good. Yeah, absolutely.
And what about your favourite app in general?
Yeah, you caught me out there. I don't know. And I don't know, the app world has sort of changed in a way, hasn't it? Because everything is driven through apps. So if I want to watch TV, if I want to watch, Amazon Prime, it's through an app, and emails through an app, everything's through an app. I don't know.
Okay.
I've got some great music ones though, I must admit. There's ones that you can buy as a saxophone player where it gives you the music and then it plays a great accompaniment and then it turns the page over for you. But there's one called iReal where you can program in the chord sequence, and then you can also download thousands and thousands of songs, and you can play it in any key, at any tempo, in any style. They're amazing, those ones, in terms of being able to be at home and practice and have something interesting to play, rather than just playing C major all the time. Yeah.
Sounds good.
I will. That gets my vote.
And who would you say has been the biggest influence in terms of your life?
Overall?
Yeah.
Difficult one. My wife, I think, probably has influenced me a lot. My children have influenced me a lot. They're not, my children have never been shy to kind of go, yeah, but no, you're wrong. You know, you've got all this wisdom, but I just think you're wrong. And I love that. I love that kind of relationship I have with all three of them, actually, that they are more than happy to correct me, but they do it very, very gently. And so I think I've learnt to sort of, not be arrogant. I think my dad sometimes is like, well, yes, Andrew, but you need to understand this, you need to understand. I'm going, okay. But and I've learned not to do that with my children, because they just sort of say, yeah, be down with things. So, I'll teach you now.
It is interesting, like you say, that the respectfulness, that the difference in respectfulness that you have from when a parent will give you a negative or a suggestion compared to when your children do. Definitely. I can fully relate to that. Having two girls as well, it's
Well, they're very gentle with it. They're very gentle. I'm writing the Girls on Board book now, and I did a 40,000 word first draft, and I showed it to Holly, who's 23, and she was like, doesn't work at all, I don't think. But bless her, she kind of spent the next 4 days going through every single sentence with me, trying to work out where it was going wrong, and we labelled every paragraph and then restructured the book from the ground up. So she was prepared to put the legwork in to kind of support me. So that's brilliant.
Brilliant, excellent.
Yeah.
So thank you ever so much for your time, being
pleasure.
a part on this webinar. What's the best, or where are the best places for people to find you?
On Twitter, I'm called Girls on Board UK, and Thorpe Hall School. I've got a blog on thorpehallschool.co.uk again, and those are probably the two best places to find me. Yeah.
And what was the head teacher?
Yeah, that's a good one actually.
Training.
It's called Leading an Independent School, which is all one word. .co.uk, and Jill and I run that for 4 weeks into half term every term, and we usually take on around 25 people. And we've had probably 500 people go through that over the years, of whom over 100 are now in post.
Brilliant.
So if you're remotely interested in independent education becoming head, I strongly suggest you do that. It's quite well known now, as you can imagine, as a course. And I think if you put that on your CV, people are recognising that you've gone through that quality mark.
Excellent. Well, what I'll do, I'll add the links onto here, and also in the reel below. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can. And thank you ever so much for your time.
My great pleasure. Thank you. All the best.
Brilliant. Take care.